I'll move on to the next question here. At Dragonet asks, when they shop online at the moment, they're just using their debit and credit card online because most places don't cake. Being in Europe, privacy.com is out of the question. The closest that I'm aware of is Revolut, PayPal, Google Pay, or just a secondary bank account that I add funds to and from as needed when they pay for things. Of these options and any others you're aware of, what are the pros and cons of these options for privacy and security? Being in the EU definitely makes it very tricky because the EU has a lot stricter financial regulations than the US, which is, I mean, you can debate whether that's a good or a bad thing, but it does prevent stuff like privacy.com from being really readily available. The thing I would look for first, and maybe you've already done this, is like whether your bank has virtual card services, or like if you have a credit card that has virtual card services where you can generate a new number for each site, kind of like privacy.com, but through your bank. Because a lot of banks more and more are doing that, especially if you have an online bank where that's an option that many people don't realize is available to them. The other thing is with this stuff, I guess if vouchers aren't available on many of the sites you use, it really depends on the sites that you're purchasing from too. Because like if you can purchase, when it comes to financial privacy, I think we always generally say that cash is king when it comes to this. And if you can avoid shopping online in the first place in buying things in cash or buying gift cards in cash and then using those to shop online, that's always better. Yeah, it's tricky. I've looked into Revolut. I don't think that they are particularly privacy friendly by any means. If that's like your only option, that might be viable because it does give you the virtual card protection where you can use that to maybe prevent sites from correlating your purchases, but it's not, their privacy policy wasn't great, just like it isn't with PayPal or Google Pay. They do a lot of data sharing. I would definitely look into the privacy policies of any service you end up using. But yeah, I don't know if you, off the top of your head, come up with anything for European users with this.
No, and it's sadly I don't. There aren't many services I've heard of. But what I'll say, because this is an issue in the US as well, which is the education around the services. Something we've received. We got a angry email once from somebody who was like, "You guys recommend privacy.com on your website," and I tried to sign up, and they asked for my personal bank account and blah blah blah, and they were really pissed, and they were like, "Why do you recommend a service that asks for this information?" And I felt that's something I see a lot, which is people kind of misunderstand what services like privacy.com are supposed to do. They're not supposed to make you anonymous and not accept any information. They're still tied to your personal bank account. What privacy.com delivers privacy for is all the third party services. It's instead of you needing to put your debit card into 100 websites, you now put in 100 alias cards that don't have to be tied to you on 100 websites. And you can now just trust privacy.com to handle that information, which still has a risk, but it's much less risk, in my opinion, for a lot of people than to have to upload your information to 100 sites. So to kind of answer your question with, in my opinion, from like the pros and cons perspective, just ask what it's giving you privacy towards. Something like Revolut might give you privacy against third parties, very similar to privacy.com, but they might not have the best privacy policy themselves, but that might be okay because that's the best you can do. And that's better than the alternative. Google Pay and Apple Pay. Apple Pay would ideally be better because it's a bit more robust than Google Pay in terms of the privacy it provides. Apple Pay is really nice for in person purchases, and it allows you to, at least from a security perspective, use a different card number. It doesn't do a new card per transaction or per vendor, but it is a separate card number than what your actual card number is. And it's really hard to use those funds for fraud or anything like that, which is a really important thing to protect. So I think that just kind of being aware of where you're gaining privacy and security with each tool is just an important thing to keep in mind when you explore those options. But I don't know if there's a lack of resources for this in Europe because there aren't services, so therefore there's no resources, or I don't know if that there just aren't enough Europeans talking about it. But there's a lot of privacy advocates in Europe, and there still isn't much happening from there. So my guess is there just aren't many services like privacy.com in Europe.
No, yeah, that's something that like a lot of the European team members at Privacy Guides were looking at on the Privacy Guides forum, and there just aren't that many options because something like privacy.com just isn't, there isn't a way to do that legally in Europe under their current banking regulations.
It's
Um,
tough.
is basically what it came down to. I see Dragon at a second question at the end as well that's kind of related about the data collected by your bank. Can they find out exactly what you bought, or do they just have to determine based on metadata? The answer to that question, it really depends on the merchant you're buying from. So in most cases, your bank is only going to get information about like who you're purchasing from, the merchant themselves, the billing zip code, and the transaction amount. In some cases, they might get a bit more detail, like how much the sales tax was or some other stuff. But in it, some merchants will provide to banks and other payment providers what's called level 3 transaction data, which is something that if you're interested in this topic, I would look into more. Just search for more information about that. But that could potentially include really detailed information about what you're purchasing, like the type of project you're purchasing, maybe what the product is specifically, how much you bought. Um, and banks can work together with merchants to get that information. Like I think Amazon will provide that information to banks if they're registered with Amazon and they have some kind of partnership. Banks can get that level 3 transaction information and see all that stuff. And other merchants will do that as well. So if that's a topic you're interested in, I would definitely look into that more. But it's definitely possible, even if that doesn't happen for most purchases. It's a thing.
That's
Yeah.
not something I've read much about, so I need to dig into that. Thanks for watching this Techlore clip. This actually comes from the main Techlore channel where we talk about digital rights, privacy, security, and how to keep yourself safe and sane online. We'll see you over on the main channel, or feel free to check out some more clips.